Thank you all for joining us today. Our group, Labor, Efficiency, Automation, and Production, or LEAP, Nursery Crops Toward Sustainability, received a USDA NIFA Specialty Crops Research Initiative Award in 2024 to both create automation and stimulate adoption of existing automation in nursery crops and also increase efficiency in nursery production. You can read all about that and see other recorded presentations like the one today, and this one will be posted in about a week or so at nurseryleap.com. That's nurseryleap.com. And follow through on the Leap Forward tab, and you should be able to see all of the other recorded presentations very similar to this one. Today's event is part of our LEAPS outreach called Leap Forward Innovation in Nursery Automation that invites growers, allied industry to present ideas, services, tips, and tricks about how nursery growers can save labor, become more efficient, adopt automation, and streamline production, and leap forward, saving labor and returning investment. Our guest speaker today is Rayne Gibson, who is the green industry consultant and owner of Taproots Horticulture Consulting, which specializes in nursery operations, systems, processes, and more. He graduated from Louisiana State University in horticulture, and he grew up working on a family nursery and has vast experience in all facets, including owner, manager, marketing, logistics, finance, spray programs, and facilities. And Taproots Horticulture now resides in, I think that's Brobridge, Louisiana, but
Yeah, you
operates
got it right.
globally. Yeah, I was thinking Bo at first, but then I saw the R. Uh,
Yep.
and he is going to present empowering green industry leaders with insights, expertise, and community for about 20 minutes. And he's willing to take questions during the actual presentation. So if you have them, please unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can wait until afterwards, or you can type it in the chat, and I'll have Anna will be monitoring the chat to answer questions or to ask the questions, or you can wait until afterwards. Uh, so with that, I'll let Rayne Gibson present his presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony.
Mhm.
Again, my name is Rayne Gibson, like rain that falls from the sky. There's a small city in South Louisiana, which named after, don't know exactly what happened there, but that's what I'm named for. And I started Taproots Horticulture Consulting I take that back. I've been consulting for nearly my whole life. People have asked me, "Hey, Rayne, how do you do these things? What do you do? How did you do this? Hey, man, I'm having a horrible time with this. What are your numbers around this? What did you do? What did you do? What did you do?" And I always just gave them the answer. It was one of those things that, hey, look, if you want to be ahead, and I'm sure all of you have witnessed, if you have a question, you can ask your neighbor, and they will give you an answer. So I did that for years. Again, um, kind of to go into a little bit of a history, a little bit more in depth history. I grew up in Forest Hill, which is nursery capital, and I watched a family business start from a brokerage business. We bought and sold plants across the Gulf South. We did that for about 20 years, and then in 2002, we decided, hey, look, we're going to open up a nursery, 10 acres, growing 10 crops for our top 10 customers. And over the course of 10 years, expand that over to well over 200 acres. So I got to see all the ins and outs and how to scale a business, scale an effective business from the inside, being the owner's son. I got to see these growing pains that we all talk about in real time and see how they were solved. To the point where we were nationally recognized. I was shipping plants from literally from coast to coast. Left the family business in 2020. I had the opportunity to run a re-wholesale nursery, as I call them, re-wholesale nurseries, meaning they buy in product from finished vendors to sell to local landscape suppliers. In which I had to flip the roles. I had to purchase plants from across the country for our local landscapers. And with that, I got to travel to vendors and travel to production growers, greenhouse growers across the country and see how differently they operate. And it was at that moment I realized that many of the problems that the nursery over here is struggling with, hey, they already figured that out in California, or the people that are struggling with something in Texas, man, they've been doing that for years over in the Carolinas. You should go talk to those guys. So with that, I realized that, hey, look, there is an opportunity for me to start a consulting business where I can scale many businesses rather than just one at a time being an employee, given that I have a track record of growing businesses. And I grew that with the foundation of being the resource that I wish that I had whenever I was growing up in the nursery. And with that, relied around a few very core ideals that I found to impact every business that I've touched. It started with data communications and processes, and that's kind of broad. And that's exactly why y'all are here today, is to fix, a few handful of those core topics right there. And as I started working with nurseries on specific topics, I thought I was going to be the production plan guru. And I thought that's what I needed to help the industry with, because I saw many nurseries that have a production plan or succession plan, but I couldn't even start with that if we didn't have data. I couldn't start that if we didn't have process or didn't have good software, didn't have good information. Okay, so I was going to do sales coaching. I've bought and sold plants across the country, but again, I was falling short because we didn't have good information. So I backed up and said, okay, if I want to be the resource that I wish I had, it needs to start with these handful of services. And from there, that is where I can derive a lot of value in a very short amount of time. Whereas typically, let's take software for example. Typically, the proverbial can gets kicked down the road for 2 years because we're not sure we're ready. And what I do is I give you the yes, you are ready. Here's the layout of exactly what we're going to do, and here's how to do it. So that is, in a nutshell, my history and what it is that I do. I get to travel across the country working with production growers, wholesale grower nurseries, re-wholesale nurseries, as well as some of the supplemental green industry businesses like soil amendment programs and software providers and things like that. Being the what I call a liaison between what they do and speaking grower, which can be a difficult transition sometimes, especially for like my software guys that I work with. They know software in and out, but they don't understand how to grow plants, and vice versa. My growers, they don't know what an API connection is. They just want it to click and connect. So I help be that liaison to transfer that knowledge. But when I learned about what y'all are doing here with data, with process, with automation, that is from my standpoint of what can I do to help a nursery do one of three things: make money, which typically that's sales coaching; save money, which that's efficiencies and operations and things like that; or preferably both, which is going to be the data side, which is going to be the automation side. For the last few years, I've been hired to go to Mance and do nothing but make introductions and see the opportunities that there are for growers and make those introductions, those high level introductions. Say, hey, look, here's this nursery here. Here's what they're doing. Y'all two should get together. And if you do this, then this will equal this amount of business for you. And so, with all that comes a lot of automation. When I look at automation, it typically is the way that I put it and help kind of translate that is anything we could do to get the intuitive knowledge out of our brains and into somewhere else. So maybe that is the growing, maybe that is the trimming, maybe that is the potting, anything we can do to get that intuitive knowledge out of our brains. And that can go all the way down to SOPs and typically again that software aspect. So, what does a nursery struggle with? These are kind of broad, but it's what I see over and over and over again. I was telling somebody yesterday that working with nurseries, the majority of nurseries, it's like banging my head up against a wall, because I can show you, hey, look, this works, this works, this works. But without the data to provide that, without the want to do it, it gets difficult. It doesn't take a fancy nursery to grow a great plant. I've been through literally hundreds of nurseries. In the month of May 2022, I saw over 200 nurseries in Florida. So I went through all the way from Lake Placid all the way through the Panhandle on the east side I'm sorry, on the west side of Florida, install over 200 nurseries. And it does not take a beautiful, fancy, state of the art nursery to grow a great plant. It doesn't. It takes heart, it takes skill, it takes passion to do that. But what I also see is walls that almost every nursery hits. And it's typically around 500,000, around 2 to 3 million. And then the next wall is going to be between 5 and 7. After that is about 11 to 12. And then it gets into about 18 million. And each one of those walls, every nursery I've worked with has just they've scaled to the point you can only expand your physical footprint so much and not hit those walls. So much so that if someone tells me, "Hey, look, this is my product mix. This is where I'm at in the country, um, and this is my acreage," I could probably guess about exactly how much you're doing based on just those metrics alone. So with that, it doesn't take a beautiful nurture to grow a beautiful plant. It does take, however, a little bit different thinking. It takes looking outside of yourself to be able to expand and jump over those walls. What that means is whenever you focus internally, meaning I'm sure this is going to sound familiar to those who've read The E Myth by Mr. Graeber. But whenever you focus only on internal, you only look inside of your world, of your ecosystem, there's only so much that you can squeeze out of that sponge. If you fill it full of water, there's only so much you can squeeze out of it until eventually you've got to start looking for water somewhere else outside. And that's what I see is a big challenge running into the nursery business. They're operating on experience and instinct, which is wonderful, but it can only get you so far. If I look at a business and it says, okay, hey, look, we make 7 million, we're on about 150 acres, and I ask them, okay, well, what does your org chart look like? And they say, it's me. I'm the grower. I'm the sales manager. I'm the production manager. I do it all, man. I'm the guy or woman. That is the that is a huge red flag to me. Right, because that's again, we whenever we try to figure out what it is it takes to build a nursery and to automate past that, it's also getting you out of the scenario. So in reality, how do we climb over that wall? It takes one insights, right, to invite criticism, internal and external. It means that we're going to look outside of ourselves and we're going to not just ask our neighbor what they did. I grew up in Forest Hill, Louisiana. There's 200 something nurseries in this little town. And whenever I was trying to grow and figure out how to do things, well, I looked at my neighbors that were doing things better than I was and said, hey, I want to be like those guys. But I want to invite you to look into a term called business parallelism. What that means for my math majors is that a perfectly parallel line can never intersect and can never touch each other. That means that if you are doing nothing but trying to follow someone else's growth, you will never be able to surpass it. You will always be chasing after their growth. So when you start looking at external inputs, you look at things, how things can be done differently outside of your neighbors, looking nationally, looking at the market as a whole, that's when you see those companies that just skyrocket out of nowhere. I'll give you an example, Natchez Tree Farm. A guy with zero growing experience, had no idea what he was doing, said, hey, look, I love the green industry. I'm going to open up a tree farm in North Mississippi. Started, asked every tree grower he could find, if you were to do something different, what would you do? What would you not do? What would you focus on instead? And he took all that information, he gathered it, and he started Natchez Tree Company. Now he's growing some of the most premium trees in northern Mississippi to satisfy the southern markets and doing something completely different to the point where he's not worried about competition. He is creating his own market in that sense. So it takes insight, uh, inviting criticism from internal and external, and then gathering KPI data. And that's something that is super important. Whenever I'm looking at a business that has no data, That means even if they are on a good ERP system, if they haven't put in some form of lead and lag indicators, which that's something I would definitely, if I have a notebook in front of me right now, I would ask y'all to look up lead and lag indicators. It's not necessarily common technology or terminology, but it's definitely important to figure out what those lag indicators are. What is it that creates the results that goes on the P&L? What actions go into creating that sales goal? That is your lead versus lag indicators, and that can be done for any part of your business. Production, especially liners, your planting, your sales, marketing, trade shows, everything is going to have a lead and a lag indicator. So looking at that insights, that's the first thing I'm going to do. If I go into your business tomorrow, it's exactly what I'm going to look at. What are your lead and lag indicators? What wall are you hitting right now? Look at expertise, right? Again, if I go into a business, the one thing I do is I also look at your personnel, look at your company culture. I'll give you a story. I worked with a 275-acre nursery in the Panhandle of Florida 3 years ago on their production plan. So I interviewed all of their headliner grower, their section growers, and their production manager, and interviewed all these people. And I asked them, "Hey, look, what do you think is holding you back?" And they all pointed to the same person. This one person is holding me back. If I didn't have to wait on information, then I could just run loose. I know what needs to be done months ahead of time, but I'm waiting for a literal sticky note of what to do that week because that person controls everything. And whenever I asked that person, I said, "Hey, look, I think that this is our bottleneck. What can we do to circumvent this?" He said, "Rayne, I wish people would just shut up and go to work. I pay them good. I give them time off. They just need to do the work." Say, okay, well, that wall that you're talking about hitting isn't going to go anywhere if we don't try and fix this leadership, this culture issue first, right? I can give you all the production plan. I can give you KPIs. I can give you lead and lag indicators. I can show you how other people do it. But if we're not willing to give up some of that power and get and trust your people that you've hired and you've brought from states over to work for you, we have to trust them, then we're not gonna be able to do anything. Right. So get your brain out of it. First thing I look at, I'll say first thing, one of the first things I look at is SOPs. These can be written, but as long as they're very well understood exactly how things happen. That is again taking that knowledge, taking that intuitive knowledge, that intuition that you have built over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years and getting it out of your brain. Asking for help from someone that's not your neighbor. Talked about that earlier. Uh, Look at people that are way bigger than you. Look at people that are, 10 times your size and see how they do things. And your problems are going to seem small to them because, yeah, they figured out. They figured that out years ago. Ask them how they did it. I can almost guarantee you they will help you. And if they won't, I certainly will. The last one that we're going to look at is again that community. Put all these things together and exactly why you are here today is to foster the sense of community that you have each other's backs. Again, we're talking to Mr. Anthony. He has people from all over the country, from Oregon, Texas, Ohio, of course, the Carolinas. There are people that can help you. There are people that can help you gain insights and gain these KPIs, gain these lead and lag indicators, and gain that expertise. And again, that's exactly what I started with, trying to figure out exactly how to be the resource that I wish that I had, that I wish more people would lean into and just give me a call to figure out what does this look like? How do I get over this wall? So when we put all these together, your production is going to be aligned with demand. I don't know about many of you. If typically when I do this at live sessions for associations, I ask if there's any salespeople, any production people in the audience, and typically I get a few hands up for each of them. And what I say is that typically sales and production are fighting each other. And that's typically the case. Sales says, man, you should have produced more, or why didn't you spray these, or why did you cut these? And then vice versa. Production is yelling at sales, and you didn't sell enough of these. What do you mean I have to grow twice as many? I don't have the space for these. Well, I've got to fertilize them, or you can't sell them yet. Whatever that may look like, they're typically fighting against each other. Whenever you put those things together, that community, that insights, expertise, and you start building that culture and building that respect amongst yourself internally, but also externally, that's when you start getting aligned. That's when clear decision making starts. If you have the data, you can see it clearly. $27 million nursery helped last year. They were trying to figure out how many hundreds of thousands of 1 gallons of one particular item they're supposed to be planting for their succession plan. And the only information that they had was the last 3 years of total sales, and their number one sales rep sitting there saying, I don't know, I think I can grow, but I think I can sell about 20,000 more. Right? That is the definition of throwing mud at the wall and hoping that it sticks. All right. So that's where, again, clear decision making, having that data to back all these insights, these lead and lag indicators, stronger leadership teams. Right. I can go into a whole nother session about what leadership is and how to build it. I mean, personally, when I say that I built a 4X their business, was I can wholeheartedly say that it was right time, right place, and leadership. That is the only thing that I can contribute and say, hey, look, this is what we did. And this is why we were able to keep up and scale the results that we did over and over and over again. Communication between sales and production. There, if you do nothing, if you do absolutely nothing for your business, your nursery, except do just that, figure out how to get those two people truly on the same team, that is worth its weight in gold. Absolutely. And then, of course, more confident long term planning. There's a um, crystal ball that all nurserymen talk about. And part of my job and the way that I explain my services is that I help alleviate that crystal ball, that wondering of what we should do next. Is this enough? And how can we get those lead and lag indicators? But the most important thing is the worst thing we can do is wait till tomorrow. I get calls. Typically, it's in February, March. Every single year is my technically my busy season because people have just gone to trade shows all January and they get fired up. They get hyped up. We're gonna do things new. We're gonna do things different. We're gonna have a great year, whatever that may look like. And then I say, look, all right, we can do this. I said, well, when should we start? We're thinking about starting in April or May or toward June after busy season. But the problem is, and the thing we've all seen is that you hit spring and you get busy and then you get tired. And spring maybe goes a little bit longer than you think. Right. And then it's summer and then the kids are out for school. And then it's middle of summer. Right. And then you've already burned through the cash you have for spring. You've already got other big projects you want to tackle. You've got infrastructure. You want to build greenhouses, whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden you have spring or you have fall. Then you get entrapped into fall planting and you get trapped into Thanksgiving and then Christmas, then New Year's, and it starts that cycle all over again. Again, the proverbial can that gets kicked down the road typically is 2 years that I see. Typically, people will struggle and they'll hurt and they'll have this pain of doing something so simple for 2 years. And so, for every one of my engagements, what I do is afterwards, I'll interview them and I'll say, hey, how long have you been struggling with this? And say, I don't know, about 10 years or so like this. Well, how long have you been thinking about hiring someone to help you? I don't know, for about 2 years. How long have you been thinking about getting a software system? Oh, about 2 years. Well, if you were to go back in time, what would you tell yourself? If you were to go back in time 2 years ago to that person that was thinking, debating about doing something, what would you tell that person? And without a beat, every 100% of the time, they all say, just do it. I don't care what time it is. I don't care what time of year it is. Just do it. You will be so thankful. It is way easier than you thought it was going to be. Just do it. So that was a whole bunch of high level stuff thrown at you, and that is my 3 years accumulation of helping green industry businesses from across the country. Everything from small mom and pop garden centers with like literally 2 acres of growing in their backyard in Summit, Mississippi, all the way up through uh, 2,000-acre nurseries amongst 4 different states. So it's doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are. Those are, if I were to have one 25-minute presentation on what I wish more growers would do, especially around, again, that data and those processes and those automations. That's what my that's what I wish more people would adopt. So at that time, do you have any questions, concerns, ideas, anything resonate? And if you were to pick one thing that really stood out to you, is there anything that you've been thinking about doing that you were on the fence about doing that you ask questions on? Is there anything in particular? Feel free to unmute yourself or put in the chat if you can't speak. Anyone in particular?
They'll come on. Just give them a chance to unmute. Then know they've got some questions. Just give them a chance to sort of think of one. Um, well, I do that while they're doing that, and someone can speak over me if they're about to. But how do you, so for example, there are some nurseries that are, corporately owned, but the
Mhm.
production manager might be ready to adopt some of the things you're talking about, but the owner might have a longer term view of when they're ready to do the actual improvements. How do you get that communication between them? How do you, chip away at some idealism, but then also chip away at some conservative traditions of that have been working but need to be improved? Like, how do you get everybody, say maybe there's two different locations. How do you get them all on the same
Mhm.
page? Like, how does that work out?
So I'm gonna go kind of the opposite direction with that question. If there is a production manager that isn't aligned with the owner, that tells you a lot right there. If I
Okay,
go
good
into a
point.
location and I'm doing production planning and I say, "Hey, when is the owner come in?" They say, "I don't know. He usually shows up about 10 a.m. every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, or something like that." It's like, okay, then obviously there is no communication there. So that is just a misalignment altogether. Uh, if on a corporate structure, I try my hardest to not work under corporate structure just because when I've done that, I've always grown up in a family business and very close owned businesses. And so whenever I suggest, hey, for $2,000, you can put in this and it'll solve 50% of all the problems that we talked about. And they say, well, I got to run that up the food chain. Then 2 years later, I ask them, hey, did you ever solve that problem? And they say, no, it got denied of the budget constraints, everything else for just $2,000. I can't do that. I'm looking at literally dilapidated greenhouses that are just collapsing, and they can't fix them because the budget for that is just, again, it could be $1,000, $500, and they just gets denied. So how do we get teams aligned? I don't like to move forward unless I have at least an 80% quorum. There's always, I say always, there's typically one person that's kind of stuck. They've done the same thing for 20, 30 years. They don't want to do it. They're really comfortable doing what they want to. And in that case, there arises a different issue. What that means to me is that for the last 10, 20, 30 years, that team has had no experience, no opportunities to flex their learning muscles. Just like with scar tissue, you have to, or muscle tissue, you have to continuously work that muscle to know that it's strong whenever you need it. Do I need to be able to pick up 200 something pounds and lift it over my head every single day? No. But if I need those muscles, I want to know that I have them. And same thing goes for
Gotcha, gotcha.
experiential and for teaching people that, hey, look, you got to um, get the people aligned and flex that muscle so that whenever a challenge of bringing on a new ERP system or trying something new, trying something different comes, that they are going to be ready for that, to accept that challenge.
Okay. Oh, that's excellent. Speaking of exercising your learning muscles, someone had a question in the chat about,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit further about lead and lag tasks or maybe indicators with some examples? This
Yeah.
was new terminology to them, which is good because it
Yep.
was also new to me too.
Yeah. Okay. So lead and lag and an indicator. So a lead indicator is I'll use sales because that's a great one. Sales is I want to make $50,000 this month in revenue. Right. That is a major goal. A lag indicator is okay. Well, what actions caused that revenue, that income? Okay, was it the reps making phone calls? Was it pre-book orders? Um, was it going to trade shows, getting orders? Was there a major installation? What actions caused that revenue? Right. If you your goal is 150 and you hit 225, wonderful. Let's have a pizza party, but let's figure out why. Right? Is this something that is repeatable? So there's that your lead and your lag indicator is what the actual results were versus what created those results. I do that especially in sales coaching. Uh, Having sales goals is wonderful, but I would much rather create some indicators of, okay, well, how many phone calls did you make this month? How many quotes did you send out? How big were those quotes? How many quotes? What is your average number to dollar amount average? Because then it just becomes a numbers game. Okay, well, if I want to increase my revenue, I need to I can't just make more money. I can't just make people order, but I can control some things. I can control how many phone calls I make. I can control how many quotes I send out, what out with the conversations I have at trade shows. Uh, that's things I can control. So those are your lead and your lag indicators. That makes sense, Miss Anna?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Excellent. Does anyone else have a question from the audience? I'll talk for a second while you unmute yourself and formulate your question. So if you're ready, sort of please go ahead. We'll have time for two more questions.
And while that's there, I'll go ahead and put this up there. Um, if you want to find me, I have a zero barrier, meaning that I put every single bit of my information out on, especially LinkedIn and Instagram. Every time that I have a conversation with a client, that directly translates into a LinkedIn post 9 times out of 10. If I'm working with someone in production planning and I say something or do something that helps them, I immediately put it on LinkedIn as some form of education. Um, LinkedIn is my number one. Instagram, I do all video content, and then the QR code if you want to fill that out. That's if you want direct information for exactly what it is that I do. I can send that, or you can always, of course, send me an email.
Can you make sure is that Rayne Gibson or at Taproots? Okay, that's not an email. That's
Yep.
your handle. Okay, good. Yeah,
Yep.
because I was just looking for that
Exactly.
myself. Thank you for putting that up there.
Wonderful.
Um,
All right.
all right.
Any last questions, concerns, ideas, inspirations?
The so what you were talking about meeting sales and production. So inventory management is probably super important because you're not going to be able to figure out how you sold past your goal if you didn't realize what you had to sell and how to use
Yes.
that for next time. So inventory management, I noticed is kind of a
Oh,
big
yeah.
specialty. Uh,
Yes. So that one, so like with overproduction, if you sell everything, wonderful. But how many could you have sold? Like that nursery, huge nursery that was trying to figure out, they only had the last 3 years of total combined sales. And they had their sales rep saying, okay, well, I think I could have sold 20,000 more. I would much rather have some true indicators. For me, that looks like a back order, meaning how many times did they order blue rug juniper and we didn't have any, or we didn't have them at the right time, or didn't have them in the right size, or they were overpriced, or whatever the case may be. That creates this backlog, this back order process, so that I can look and I can say exactly, okay, we sold 250,000 because that's all we produced. We had a shrinkage of 8%. Okay. So we know to take that into account when produced next. But I missed sales on 57,000 of them. Okay. So now instead of just making up some random arbitrary 10% or whatever it may be, we can actually make informed decisions on how many to grow next. And then, same thing on the other side. If you have a crop that is just sitting there, I like to use expiration dates personally, greenhouse or nursery stock. I'm going to use an expiration date. If I have a crop that's 6 months past the expiration date, And I'm saying, okay, well, I need to grow 50, 60,000 more of these things. Sure as heck not going to grow those things. I need physical space, square footage. Now that 7-gallon section isn't valuable anymore. Now that needs to be this 3-gallon section to where I can't keep up with the sales on this item.
Gotcha.
Again, what are those lead and lag indicators?
Excellent. They would also investigate the 8% shrink and try to get it down to 6. You have other ways to sort of
Yeah.
investigate that sort of things. Excellent. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. Rayne Gibson from Taproots Horticultural Consulting. You can visit his website or contact him on LinkedIn or Instagram. And also rewatch his presentation on nurseryleap.com in a couple of weeks. So thank you very much, Rayne. I appreciate it.
Thank y'all. Good seeing
Yep.
y'all.